What is your horror story from DNA tests like 23andMe?
My mother was one of 7 children of an abusive mother and beloved father. 20 grandchildren, including my cousins, my brother, and me. Through testing, some cousins have determined that at least 3 of the 7 children were not the biological offspring of my grandmother's husband. We aren't telling all the other cousins until the last uncle dies. He's 93.
Summary. Got their parents arrested for murder. It's not my story, but one known around Ireland. In the 1980s, a dead baby was found on a beach in South Kerry. It had been stabbed many, many times. A massive investigation occurred, and there were appeals for the mother to come forward. In Ireland's dark past, we have treated women, and especially unmarried mothers, terribly. A woman on the opposite side of the county was wrongly accused of killing the baby and dumping it 3 hours away. She had given birth to a baby who was stillborn, which they buried on their farmland. Her family was coerced into signing false confessions by our police force that she had killed the baby in South Kerry, even though she did not. Fast forward to 2022, there was suddenly a middle-aged married couple from South Kerry who were arrested on suspicion of killing the baby. Their child, who was in their 20s, submitted their DNA to an ancestry site. They got hits, and one of them was for the murdered baby found on the beach. They haven't been convicted. The trial hasn't happened yet.
All my life, I was told my maternal great-grandfather was one-half Cherokee. He had blue-black hair, tawny skin, and sky-high cheekbones. Even in his 80s, his hair was gray, not white. On my father's side, there was a tale where one of the sons took an African woman as his wife. My result, 97% Irish, Scotch, and English, 2.3% Scandinavian. I'm so white, I glow in the dark. The remaining 0.7% was inconclusive.
I worked in healthcare. I have heard so many NPE stories, non-parental events, basically discovering unexpected parents or relatives in your family tree. A pro tip for parents or family who are still hiding genetic secrets. The era of being able to hide these things has been over for a very, very long time. I strongly suggest you come clean on your own terms before your child or relatives inevitably find out through a DNA test. And nowadays, it's not a matter of if, it's when.
We always knew my grandma had my dad before she got married, but through Ancestry, we found out she actually had another baby, after my dad, but before she got married, with different dads.
Well, it's not my horror story, but police arrested the guy who murdered my mother decades ago because someone in the killer's family used one of those tests. The submitted DNA allowed them to get a match on a grandparent, and a couple of years later, when they subpoenaed his DNA to corroborate their other police work, he confessed. It took 40 years, but I imagine this is a hell of a horror story for him. He wasn't ever a suspect before the DNA match.
My cousin, trying to scam the government, claiming a minuscule percentage Native American, submitted a sample. What did happen was 4 children he fathered with 4 women other than current wives found him.
I did Ancestry DNA a few years ago. Found out my father sexually assaulted over 50 women.
I'm the product of rape, and my mom was pregnant with me when she met my dad. My biological father is dead, but I have a bunch of half-siblings who are pretty cool now. I am estranged from my family of origin. They disowned me because I'm gay. So I don't know if they know or if they always knew. Turns out one of my half-siblings is also gay, and their parents are super supportive and threw a coming-out party. Weird how stuff works out.
Not a horror story, but the opposite. My mom always told me my father wasn't my biological father. I hated her for telling me and didn't want to believe it. A few years after I did 23andMe, I checked my shared DNA list and saw a cousin I was close to from my paternal side. I was so relieved and happy and thankful I never told anyone what my mom told me.
One of my great-uncles got contacted by a woman who said he was her father after she took a test through one of those sites. He denied it vehemently, and it caused some strife in the family until it was revealed that it was actually his older brother who was the father. Turns out he was kind of a cad in his youth and never found out until now.
Not via 23andMe or anything like that,
But after my grandmother passed away, my mum found some documents which led her to believe that Grandma might have given a child up for adoption. She spent quite a bit of time and effort investigating and eventually confirmed her suspicion and tracked her half-brother down living in another state. As often happens, though, they had very little in common. He'd had a pretty rough childhood and compensated for that via alcohol. However, he latched on to the idea of a new family pretty hard, and now Mum gets to enjoy semi-regular drunken phone calls from her half-brother.
My mom is an orphan, did the test, discovered she's a fifth-generation orphan on the maternal side. Yes, her mom, and her mom's mom, all orphans. Her maternal side grandfather went to prison for 5 years for arson when he was caught burning his house down for insurance money in the Great Depression in the 1930s. Her paternal side revealed her grandpa was murdered on a bridge over a river in Kentucky, smuggling whiskey in the Prohibition. His murderer served only 4 years in prison, and it is still a case precedent in Kentucky's Court of Appeals. Both of these stories or events happened within 5 years of each other and one state apart. Now, this all makes sense if you knew my mom. She stabbed my dad in the heart with a fork and then tried to run him over with her Dodge Dart Demon in the 70s. And now all the crazy stuff I've done in my life suddenly makes sense. Genetics.
My mom's generation has been really big into tracing our family tree. Turns out Grandpa had 2 families that we know of that lived down the street from each other. If that wasn't enough to discourage my family from uncovering skeletons, a few years later, one of my cousins took a 23andMe test to find out that our maternal grandfather is also her dad. For those asking, the cousin in question is the daughter of my mother's sister. So we're thinking some downright unholy things went on. It is unclear as my grandfather and aunt are both dead now.